إيلون ماسك اكتشف طريقة للسفر إلى القمر في 2 ثانية، والسفر إلى المريخ في 13 دقيقة، والسفر إلى نبتون في 4 ساعات، عن طريق مركبة تسير بسرعة الضوء ولا تحتاج إلى وقود في الطريق. شغل الترجمة واستمع لهذه المعلومة المثيرة.
Works. So let's talk about what this light speed engine actually is and how it will transform space travel as we know it. The biggest issue with space travel has always been that space is really big. The moon, which many of you will probably think is not too far away, you look up and you see it in the night sky, it looks pretty big, right? It's a little less than 240,000 miles away. That distance is so great. It's enough space for all of the planets in our solar system to fit end to end between Earth and the moon. Mars is obviously a lot further away from that. Elon Musk's dream of colonizing Mars as it stands right now will take about 5 months of travel minimum just to get there. That means that you need a lot of fuel, a lot of supplies, and a lot of protection for astronauts as they are subjected to intense radiation during that voyage. SpaceX is in the final stages of assembly and testing for their new Starship spacecraft that, in theory, could overcome a lot of those challenges and safely transport humans to Mars. But Elon dreams of eventually transporting over 1 million people to Mars in an attempt to set up and expand permanent colonization of the red planet. And a 5-month minimum voyage for that many people would take decades. But the proposed Lightspeed engine could get you to Mars in less than 13 minutes without using a single drop of fuel. Einstein states that objects with mass are not able to be accelerated to the speed of light or exceed it. As an object's speed increases, so does its relative weight. If you, as a person, were try to approach the speed of light, your mass would approach an infinite weight, and we simply don't have a power source capable of producing that kind of thrust to accelerate an infinite mass object. But what we can do is get really close to the speed of light, around 99.9% of the speed of light, without having any issues of breaking Einstein's theory. There's been quite a few attempts at creating this mythical engine that mimics the warp drive from Star Trek or hyperdrive engine from Star Wars, but none have really successfully proven. But this new Lightspeed engine, known as the helical engine, can reach an insane speed of 300 million meters per second, which is about 671 million miles per hour. And like I mentioned, at that speed, you could reach the moon in 1.3 seconds, Mars in 12.5 minutes, and Neptune, which is 2.7 billion miles away, in about 4 hours. Dr. Burns, a NASA engineer at the Marshall Space Flight Center in Alabama, proposed the helical engine, which instead of using liquid fuel, uses technology similar to a particle accelerator like in the Large Hadron Collider to create thrust. The engine would use electromagnets to accelerate particles at a high speed, collide them, then recycle them back around in the engine and do it again. As particles approach the speed of light within the engine, they increase in mass before exiting the rear of that engine. That small amount of weight gained will produce a small amount of thrust. Dr. Burns theorizes that when you scale up the amount of particles being collided within the engine and exiting that rear nozzle, you can produce speeds that approach 99.9% the speed of light. Obviously, there's a far more complicated explanation needed to fully understand exactly how this engine works, especially since, according to Dr. Burns, he admits that it will violate Newton's law of motion, therefore violating the laws of physics, but somehow within the math, it all still works. Elon Musk, along with NASA, has been working together to fund the research into actually developing this Lightspeed engine. So far, what they've worked out is that the engine must be around 650 feet long and 40 feet wide to produce a single Newton of thrust, which doesn't sound like a lot, but when you consider that the engine is, being used in space, there isn't any friction to slow down the spacecraft using it. So while NASA and SpaceX are pouring billions upon billions of dollars into their huge SLS rockets and spaceship rockets, which are the most powerful rockets that humans have ever created, and an engineer from Alabama might make them all obsolete in the very near future. But there's one thing for sure. Elon won't mind the money spent and money lost if it means that getting to Mars in less time than it takes to watch an episode of The Office.